Ethan Harper had always believed his life was something out of a modern American fairy tale. He was the classic hometown success story, tall, rugged, the type of man who built his world with his own two hands and prided himself on keeping his word. Claire was the spark in his life. He still remembered the first time they met sophomore year at the University of Colorado. She was playing the piano in a nearly empty music hall, her laughter echoing as she hit a wrong note. Her thick, sunlit brown hair fell around her shoulders, and her blue eyes were wild with possibility. Ethan found himself drawn in, not just by her beauty, but by the sheer force of her personality, brilliant, magnetic, and genuinely kind. They started as friends, inseparable through every campus event, every late-night drive, every heartbreak and success. 3 months in, under a November sky that threatened snow, they shared their first awkward, beautiful kiss in Ethan's battered Chevy, parked behind the old baseball field. She cried, laughing through her tears, and in that moment Ethan knew there was no one else for him. Now, a decade later, Ethan was a respected contractor in Boulder, running his own renovation firm. At 35, he stood tall and broad-shouldered, with sandy hair that curled when he worked too long in the sun, and eyes as steady as the mountains. Claire, now Mrs. Harper, taught music at the city's best public high school, her passion for teaching almost as strong as her love for him. Their friends called them the golden couple. Life was good, comfortable, stable, full of mutual respect and an easy laughter that filled their sunlit kitchen every morning. They'd just bought a new house on Aspen Lane, a 3-bedroom fixer-upper that Ethan was transforming into a home. Finances were never a worry. Between Ethan's thriving business and Claire's tenure, they wanted for nothing. There was talk of children one day soon, maybe next year. At night, they cuddled beneath a faded quilt Claire's grandmother had made, trading stories until sleep pulled them under. For Ethan, waking up next to Claire was the best part of every day. Still, perfection is a fragile thing. Little moments had begun to trouble Ethan, a text Claire quickly hid, a sudden shift in her mood, the way she sometimes seemed far away even as they lay side by side. He told himself it was nothing, just the stress of work or the lingering winter. But one morning, as he poured coffee into her favorite blue mug, he watched Claire from across the kitchen. She stood at the window, staring into the snow falling over their yard, her face strangely distant. "Everything okay?" Ethan asked gently, forcing a smile. Claire turned, her lips curving upward. "Just thinking about my lesson plans for next week. You know how the kids are before spring break." He laughed, but a chill passed through him. She sounded normal, but there was a flatness behind her words, a note out of tune, just barely there. That evening, as they settled into their usual routine dinner, a walk, then streaming their favorite show, Ethan tried to shake off the unease. He reached for her hand and squeezed it, feeling her fingers close around his. But she let go too quickly, her eyes flickering toward her phone. "You're quiet tonight," he said, searching her face for some reassurance. Claire shrugged, offering another soft smile, but her eyes slid away from his. "I'm just tired, that's all. Long day." Ethan nodded, telling himself not to overthink. He wanted to believe her. He had always trusted Claire, trusted their history, their rituals. And yet, as they sat side by side on the worn living room couch, Ethan felt a strange coldness seep into the spaces between them. She laughed at a scene on the television, but the sound didn't reach her eyes. Later that night, lying together in bed, Ethan watched the patterns of streetlights dance on their bedroom ceiling. Claire was already asleep, her breathing soft and even. He reached out, brushing a stray lock of hair from her forehead. For a brief moment, he remembered the girl at the piano, the girl who cried tears of joy in his old Chevy. He wondered if she was still there, somewhere inside the woman beside him. But as he closed his eyes, a faint ache settled in his chest, a premonition he couldn't shake. For the first time in their marriage, Ethan felt something precious slipping away, as if he were standing at the edge of a perfect photograph, watching the colors begin to fade. Ethan's hands tightened on the steering wheel as he turned onto the winding drive that led to the Key West resort. The sun was melting gold into the horizon, and every palm tree seemed to wave a silent promise of peace. For Ethan and Claire, this was supposed to be the start of a new chapter, a warm escape from the chill of Colorado, a chance to revive what had always made them strong. Claire gazed out the window, sunglasses hiding her eyes, as they approached the gleaming facade of the Seabreeze Grand. She'd been distant all morning, replying to Ethan's gentle attempts at conversation with distracted smiles. He chalked it up to travel fatigue, refusing to let unease take root. He wanted this trip to be perfect, a memory that would outshine the shadows creeping into their days. Inside the airy marble lobby, Ethan was busy at the front desk when he first noticed the man. Lean, athletic, dark-haired, wearing a crisp linen shirt open at the neck, he watched Claire with a familiarity that set Ethan's teeth on edge. The man offered a casual nod, a smirk curling his lips before he disappeared toward the elevators. Ethan turned to Claire, searching her face. She was preoccupied, phone in hand, typing a message with her thumb flying across the screen. "Who was that?" Ethan tried to sound light. She glanced up, startled. "Just someone from the flight, I think. No one important." Ethan's gut twisted. He'd always trusted Claire, but the way she avoided his eyes, the slight tremor in her hand, it gnawed at him. He forced a smile, took their room keys, and led the way to the suite. Their room overlooked the turquoise ocean, the air rich with salt and promise. Claire slipped out to the balcony, phone glued to her ear as Ethan unpacked. He tried to focus on the trip ahead, sunrises, dinners, the long walks he'd planned. But even as he watched the waves crash below, doubt washed over him. That evening, at dinner, Claire barely touched her food. Her laughter was forced, eyes darting to the door every time it swung open. Ethan tried to engage her with stories from work, old college memories, but she seemed miles away. He caught her texting under the table, quick glances checking if he noticed. After dinner, they strolled along the moonlit beach. The air was thick with the scent of jasmine, but the silence between them was heavier still. Ethan reached for Claire's hand. She flinched, then forced a smile and wove her fingers through his, but her grip was limp. "I just need some air," she murmured, pulling away and wandering down the shoreline. Ethan stood watching her silhouette grow smaller. The ache in his chest sharpened. This wasn't just travel stress. Something deeper was wrong. He walked back to the room alone, replaying the day's small oddities in his mind. The familiar stranger, the secretive texting, Claire's distance. He lay awake for hours, listening to the rhythmic crash of the waves, turning over every detail. The first cracks in their paradise had appeared, spiderwebbing through everything Ethan thought he knew. For the first time, he admitted to himself that their marriage might never be the same. Just before dawn, he glanced at Claire sleeping beside him, her face peaceful, almost innocent. Ethan pressed his lips to her forehead, tasting salt and regret. The sun would rise soon, but for Ethan, the golden promise of paradise had already begun to fade. Ethan awoke to the watery sunlight creeping through the curtains. The ocean outside roared quietly, but inside the suite, all was still. Claire was already up, her side of the bed cool, the faint scent of her perfume lingering in the air. He found her on the balcony, wrapped in a white robe, staring at her phone as if it held the secrets of the world. "Morning," Ethan offered, voice gentle. Claire startled, tucking her phone away. "Hey, couldn't sleep." He joined her outside, the salty breeze raising goosebumps on his arms. For a while, they watched the waves together in silence. It felt almost normal. But the tension beneath the surface was sharper now, like the sting of the sea air. After breakfast, Ethan feigned interest in a walking tour of Old Town, but his mind was elsewhere. When Claire excused herself to call her sister, he lingered by the open bathroom door, listening. Her tone was low, secretive, a laughter that was too soft, words that didn't match the script of an ordinary family check-in. Later, as Claire showered, Ethan's unease drove him to her phone on the nightstand. There was no new password. His hands shook as he scrolled through her messages, and what he saw hollowed him out. The conversation was with Derek Fox. The texts were bold, unguarded, their intimacy raw. Derek. Missed you last night. Can't wait to see you. Claire. You almost got us caught at the airport. Next time, be careful. Derek. Relax. He suspects nothing. Claire. Meet me by the pool after Ethan leaves for his tour. Ethan's world narrowed to the white glow of the screen. His breath came sharp and shallow. Every message was a new cut, not just an affair, but a brazen, coordinated deception. They had planned this rendezvous long before the trip. There were even messages about wanting a future together, jokes about starting a family. He could barely see for the tears that threatened. Ethan placed the phone back where he found it, his movements robotic. Claire emerged from the shower, fresh-faced, humming a tune as if the world were unbroken. Ethan forced a smile and excused himself, heart pounding in his ears. Alone on the empty beach, Ethan's grief gave way to fury. The trust, the shared dreams, the years of devotion, all of it mocked by a series of digital confessions. He wanted to confront her, to demand answers, but instead, he found himself paralyzed by the enormity of the betrayal. Everything he believed about Claire, about their marriage, was a lie. As the sun set in a blaze of orange, Ethan sat in the sand, letting the pain hollow him out. He knew he couldn't stay silent forever. But tonight, the truth pressed down on him like the weight of the coming tide. Impossible to ignore. Impossible to escape. Night had fallen over Key West, painting the resort in warm lamplight and long shadows. Ethan returned to the suite, his mind storming with betrayal and confusion. Claire was already asleep, her breathing soft, her face a portrait of innocence that twisted the knife deeper. For a moment, Ethan stood in the doorway, unable to reconcile the woman he loved with the stranger whose secrets he now carried. He left quietly, the corridor cool beneath his bare feet, and made his way down to the pool. It was nearly midnight, and the world outside had thinned to a hush, broken only by the distant sound of laughter and the gentle splash of water. Ethan's camera, a professional model he'd bought for their travels, hung at his side, suddenly feeling heavier than ever. He found a secluded spot among the palms, his vantage point hidden but clear. It didn't take long before Claire appeared, wrapped in a red dress Ethan had bought her for their anniversary. She wasn't alone. Derek Fox followed, his hand landing familiarly on her waist. The sight burned in Ethan's chest, a confirmation more painful than any text message. With trembling hands, Ethan began to film. He captured their every movement, their laughter, the stolen kisses, the easy intimacy that was supposed to be his. Through the lens, he became both witness and documentarian, numb and meticulous. He recorded not just for evidence, but to freeze the truth in time. Proof that what he felt was not just suspicion or jealousy, but fact. Hours crawled by. Ethan shifted position only when necessary, watching as Claire and Derek moved from poolside to the outdoor bar, their affection growing bolder with each drink. The camera caught it all, their hands entwined under the table, the way Claire leaned in, the hungry look in Derek's eyes. When they finally disappeared together toward the elevator, Ethan's fingers were white from gripping the camera. He followed at a distance, his heart pounding, every nerve alight. From the shadows, he filmed them entering Derek's room, the door closed, the hallway empty, except for Ethan's shaking breath. He returned to his suite, numb, and locked himself in the bathroom. The camera sat on the counter, silent but damning. Ethan replayed the footage, every frame a dagger. There was no going back now. He knew what he had to do. He backed up the videos to the cloud, saving copies to his laptop and an external drive, meticulous even in his heartbreak. As dawn neared, Ethan looked at his reflection, eyes red, face hollow. He realized that the only way forward was through the fire. The camera never lied. And now, armed with the truth, Ethan felt something inside him harden into resolve. Whatever came next, he would not let himself be the victim. He would decide how this story ended. Ethan woke early, the heaviness in his chest replaced by a cold clarity. The resort's luxury was now a stage for deception, and he felt every polished tile and sweet ocean breeze as an insult. As he lay in bed beside Claire, her steady breathing sounded foreign to him, a stranger's rhythm in the dark. Over breakfast, Claire was cheerful, but Ethan saw through it. The nervous hands, the glances at her phone, the edge in her voice when she talked about her plans for the day. She mentioned a spa treatment and asked if he'd like to join, but Ethan declined with a smile, saying he'd rather walk the beach and clear his head. She seemed relieved, and that cut deeper than any argument could. Once Claire left, Ethan checked her purse and found a small bottle of pills tucked inside a makeup pouch. He turned the container over in his hands, the label generic. Were these for her, or meant for him? A plan began to take shape, darker and sharper with every passing minute. If Claire and Derek wanted to drug him to keep him docile, asleep, out of the way, he would turn the tables. He slipped the pills into his pocket, then spent the morning researching their effects, cross-referencing colors and imprints on his phone. Sleep aids, heavy doses, enough to knock out an adult for hours. The precision of it all almost impressed him. By midday, he knew what he had to do. That evening, as the sun went down, Ethan suggested they go out for cocktails before dinner. Claire hesitated, but then smiled, a flash of the old warmth he used to know. At the bar, Ethan ordered her favorite, a coconut mojito. Derek arrived soon after, greeting them both with practiced ease, playing the friendly acquaintance. Conversation was light, and Ethan managed a convincing performance, laughing at Derek's stories and joking about their holiday adventures. When Claire excused herself to take a call, Derek leaned closer, lowering his voice. "Everything okay between you two?" Ethan smiled thinly. "Just the usual married people stuff." Derek grinned. "Let me know if you ever need some guy time." When Claire returned, Ethan made his move. He excused himself, went to the bar to check on their order, and discreetly slipped a pill into both Derek's and Claire's next round of drinks. The powder dissolved instantly, leaving no trace. Back at the table, he watched as they sipped their cocktails, conversation growing looser, laughter easier. Within an hour, their eyes began to glaze, speech slowing, movements heavy. Ethan suggested they call it a night, and both agreed, stumbling slightly as they stood. In the hallway, Derek barely made it to the elevator before slumping against the wall, unconscious. Claire leaned into Ethan, mumbling apologies, her words slurred and distant. He half carried her back to their suite, laying her gently on the bed. For a moment, he watched her sleep, torn between love and heartbreak, before locking her phone and gathering her belongings, her passport, her wallet, anything she might use to run or call for help. Before sunrise, Ethan sat on the balcony, the wind cold against his skin. He felt neither triumph nor relief, only a strange emptiness. The tables had turned, but the victory was hollow. In the distance, the first hint of dawn crept over the ocean, promising a new day. For Ethan, there would be no more lies, no more playing the fool. The game was his now, and the rules were changing. Morning broke over the resort, streaking the sky with bruised pink and gold. Ethan paced the suite, nerves sparking under his skin. Claire and Derek were still out cold, sprawled in their separate rooms, oblivious to the new reality Ethan had created. He moved methodically, ensuring every trace of his plan was covered. Their phones were locked away, travel documents hidden, credit cards disabled. There would be no easy escape for either of them. But Ethan's anger demanded more than inconvenience. It demanded revelation. He transferred the most damning photos and videos he had taken, intimate moments, secret rendezvous, lies exposed from his camera to a series of USB drives. He printed screenshots, wrote short, factual notes, no anger, no slurs, just the truth. Then he slipped each envelope beneath the doors of key resort guests, the British tourists, the couple from the breakfast buffet, even the resort manager. An anonymous storm was about to break. Ethan wasn't done. He scheduled emails to Claire's family, Derek's supposed fiancé, and a handful of mutual friends back home. Each message contained carefully curated proof, timelines, and a simple explanation: you deserve to know. By midday, the resort was buzzing with rumors. Whispers trailed down marble hallways and across sun-drenched patios. Staff exchanged nervous glances. Guests eyed one another with new suspicion. Ethan watched from afar, detached but not unfeeling, as the first emotional aftershocks rippled through the crowd. He saw the British women confront Derek by the pool, voices sharp and public. Claire, still dazed and confused, was cornered by a pair of friends from yoga class women she'd gossiped with the morning before, now brandishing screenshots and questions. Ethan didn't linger for the fallout, but as he left the scene, he caught glimpses of red faces, tears, and furious arguments. But the drama didn't end there. News of the scandal spread, with some guests whispering about ruined honeymoons and business trips, while others secretly relished the spectacle. The resort's general manager convened a meeting with his staff to handle the crisis and address the sudden tension among guests. A pair of newlyweds from Boston even checked out early, unwilling to stay in the midst of such chaos. Ethan overheard bits and pieces as he packed his belongings. Staff spoke in hushed tones, referencing his room number, while a bartender eyed him with new curiosity. Even Derek's bravado vanished. He was last seen sitting alone on a stone bench, his head in his hands, while the British tourists argued over what to do next. Back in the suite, Ethan gathered the last of his things. His revenge was clinical, not cruel. He'd chosen to reveal, not destroy. But as he prepared to check out and book a flight home, he realized this storm would follow all of them for years. Secrets once loosed could never be pulled back. On his way out, Ethan stopped at the front desk and left a sealed envelope for Claire. Inside was a letter, not of apology or rage, but of release. I loved you more than you'll ever know. I hope one day you find the honesty you denied us both. As he stepped into the glaring Florida sun, Ethan felt the weight of the past lift, just a little. Around him, paradise was in chaos. But for the first time since it all began, he was walking away on his own terms. On the flight home, Ethan stared out the window at endless blue sky, his mind replaying every moment. The pain lingered, but something else had taken root, a strange, tentative hope. For the first time in a long while, he could imagine a future not defined by betrayal, but by his own choices. He closed his eyes, letting the engine's hum drown out the ghosts of Key West, ready at last to start over. Ethan's return to Colorado was quiet, uneventful, and for the first time in weeks, entirely on his own terms. He pulled into Aspen Lane just after dusk, the streetlights dusting the driveway with pale gold. The little house he and Claire once made their world was smaller than he remembered, dwarfed now by empty silence and the chill of late winter. He unlocked the front door and stepped inside. His footsteps echoed in the entryway, the walls cold and bare. There was no laughter from the kitchen, no scent of coffee brewing, no sound of Claire's music drifting from the den. Every room felt haunted by their former happiness. The living room was scattered with boxes, the once prized book collection already sorted for donation. The photo frames turned face down. Ethan began his final tasks with mechanical precision. He cleaned out the closets, bagged up old linens, and set aside Claire's keepsakes, a scarf she'd worn on their honeymoon, a stack of her favorite novels, the mug she refused to let anyone else use. Every object was a memory, sharp as glass. He boxed up the last remnants of his life in this place, labeling the cartons with impersonal black marker Kitchen, Books, Michigan SC. Mail arrived in a thick, ominous stack. Among the utility bills and advertisements was an envelope from Claire's attorney, a notice of formal proceedings, legal language crisp and cold. Ethan read it only once. The demand for joint property, the inventory of accounts and assets, the gentle threats veiled as legal necessity. He set it aside without anger. He was done fighting. But the house itself was harder to leave behind. Every surface, every faded paint chip, was the record of 1,000 ordinary days. In the garage, he found a battered Polaroid taken their first summer together. Claire squinting into the sun, Ethan's arm around her shoulders, both laughing like the future couldn't possibly hold any storms. He stared at the image a long time before tucking it into a box marked Memories. That evening, Ethan cooked a simple dinner in the half-empty kitchen. He ate by the window, the mountains ghostly blue in the dusk. For dessert, he let himself remember the way Claire would dance while washing dishes, the arguments that faded into laughter, the promise they once made to always come home to each other. He didn't cry. He simply let it all be real. Before dawn, Ethan made a final sweep. He left the keys on the counter, checked the rooms one last time, and closed the door behind him. The weight of the house fell away with the click of the lock. In the driveway, his breath fogged in the morning air, and the sky stretched wide and pale overhead. Aspen Lane faded behind him as he drove away, heart sore, but unburdened. Whatever waited on the road ahead, it was his to claim, and this time, there would be no more ghosts to hold him back. A week passed, then another. Ethan drifted through the days as if waking from a long, disorienting dream. The routines that once defined him, checking job sites, drinking coffee at his usual diner, watching the Rockies catch fire at sunset, felt at once familiar and foreign. His phone buzzed with messages from friends and colleagues, most of which he ignored. News of his split with Claire had traveled fast, and so had the rumors. He was grateful for the distance, the chance to rebuild quietly. But some wounds refused to heal on their own. Each morning, Ethan woke from dreams, where Claire's laughter still rang through their kitchen, her perfume lingering in the hall. He would reach for her out of habit, only to meet empty sheets. The pain was sharp, but different now, a memory more than a living wound. He let himself grieve, refusing to rush the process. One afternoon, Ethan found himself driving to his brother's house on the outskirts of Boulder. Frank welcomed him with a bear hug and 2 cold beers. They sat on the back porch, the mountains etched in gold, talking about nothing and everything, childhood summers, favorite fishing holes, their father's stubbornness. For a while, Ethan felt like himself again. "Are you all right?" Frank asked quietly, not pressing, just present. Ethan considered, then nodded. "I think I will be." That night, Ethan sat in the guest room, scrolling through the photos he'd saved from the household birthdays, snowy Christmases, blurry selfies. He deleted most of them, keeping only the ones that reminded him who he wanted to be, not what he'd lost. He made a promise to himself: no more living in the shadows of someone else's choices. His pain would not define his future. He would build new memories, brick by brick, as surely as he had built homes for strangers. Days blended into weeks. Ethan took long walks, cooked his own meals, and found solace in the simple act of waking up with nothing to hide. He applied for new work, made plans to visit the coast, even called his mother to assure her he was fine. He wasn't, not entirely, but he was on his way. One evening, as rain fell against the window and thunder rolled over the plains, Ethan picked up his guitar and began to play. The music was clumsy at first, but soon the old skill returned. His voice rose, raw and clear, echoing in the empty room. For the first time since the world had fallen apart, Ethan felt something stir inside him, something like hope, fragile but real. The aftershocks of betrayal would linger, but they would not last forever. He was learning, note by note, to write a new song. As March melted into April, Ethan began to feel the old rhythms of life slowly return. Colorado's air grew softer, buds broke open on every tree, and the city's parks swelled with the hopeful noise of spring. He filled his days with work on small renovation jobs, patching up porches, painting fences, fixing leaky roofs for neighbors and friends. There was a quiet comfort in the simple labor, a way to keep his hands busy and his mind at peace. But new beginnings demanded more than solitude. One Saturday, Frank convinced him to join a weekend softball game at the community field. Ethan hesitated, awkward at first among old friends and new faces, but by the third inning, he found himself laughing at missed catches and overzealous swings. Someone handed him a cold drink. The sun was warm on his skin. For a few hours, the world was uncomplicated. That night, Frank's wife, Julia, invited him for dinner. The table was crowded with kids and laughter, the kitchen alive with the scent of homemade bread. Ethan talked about nothing important: baseball, hiking trails, a neighbor's runaway dog. For the first time in months, he didn't have to measure his words or hide his sadness. He simply existed. Yet some nights, when the house was quiet and the city lights blinked against the mountains, Ethan felt the weight of loneliness settle over him. He missed Claire, yes, But more than that, he missed the certainty he'd once taken for granted. Now, uncertainty felt like freedom. He wrote in a battered notebook, making lists of things he wanted to do. Road trips, a cabin in the woods, learning to cook something besides pasta and eggs. One Sunday, he volunteered for a community build restoring a dilapidated playground at a local park. Working alongside neighbors and strangers, Ethan found himself teaching a teenager how to use a circular saw, laughing as paint spattered his boots. The sense of purpose was real. The gratitude in the children's faces, even more so. Slowly, almost without noticing, Ethan allowed new people into his life. He met a bookseller named Lila, with quick wit and thoughtful eyes. They shared coffee, traded stories about their favorite novels, talked about travel and music and the oddities of small-town life. Nothing was rushed. Friendship, perhaps something more, blossomed gently. On the last night of April, Ethan stood outside his tiny apartment, the city humming quietly below. He looked up at the stars, letting the cool air wash over him. The wounds still ached, but they were healing. He wasn't rebuilding the life he'd lost. He was creating something new, stronger, his own. As he turned out the porch light and went inside, Ethan realized he was finally, truly home. May arrived with rain and wildflowers, turning the city's parks lush and green. For Ethan, it was the first time in years he didn't dread the change of season. He approached each day without a plan, letting curiosity and kindness lead him forward. If the past was a closed door, the future now beckoned like a path through sunlit woods. Ethan poured his energy into new projects. He worked side by side with Lila at the bookshop on weekends, learning how to order titles, organize events, and talk literature with a small but loyal clientele. He fixed the shop's creaky door and built new shelves for the children's corner. There was satisfaction in the work, a rhythm that felt honest and earned. Some days, he joined Frank and Julia for family dinners. Their children pulled him into board games and backyard soccer, the house brimming with warmth and gentle chaos. The sense of belonging, once foreign, now felt natural. Julia teased him about the growing stack of mystery novels on his nightstand. Frank dragged him out for sunrise hikes in the foothills, laughing as Ethan grumbled about early alarms. At night, when the city quieted, Ethan sometimes lay awake, thinking of everything that had come before the betrayal, the heartbreak, the empty house. These memories no longer felt like traps. They were simply the background to the present, reminders of all he had survived. He let them fade as he looked ahead. One Saturday, Lila invited him to a local music festival. Ethan was hesitant, afraid of crowds and old triggers, but her presence was steady, reassuring. They wandered between food trucks and stage lights, Lila's laughter cutting through the noise. When a band began to play an old folk song, Ethan surprised himself by singing along, voice clear and unafraid. Lila squeezed his hand, and for the first time, Ethan believed he could belong here with her, with all of it. The summer unfolded in long, golden days. Ethan and Lila took road trips to mountain lakes, cooked elaborate meals, camped beneath the stars. With every new memory, the scars inside Ethan faded, replaced by hope and anticipation. He started writing again, not just lists or journal entries, but stories. Some were about building and repairing, others about loss and forgiveness, but all of them pointed toward possibility. He sent one to Lila, who read it aloud in the lamplight and cried at the ending. They sat quietly together, the story lingering between them like a promise. On the 4th of July, as fireworks burst over the city, Ethan stood with Lila on his apartment rooftop. The world below was loud and bright, but his heart was steady. Tomorrow was unwritten, full of risk and wonder, and for the first time, he was ready to meet it head on. Whatever came next, Ethan knew he would face it with courage and with love. By late summer, Ethan's world had expanded in ways he never expected. The routines that once weighed him down were now scaffolding for something new, a life that belonged entirely to him. He found joy in ordinary days, laughter in small mishaps, and a strange contentment in the slow, imperfect business of moving on. Ethan's business was thriving again, thanks to word of mouth and a reputation for honest work. He was remodeling a historic home on Maple Street when the call came, a number he didn't recognize. But something made him answer. It was Claire's mother, her voice hesitant but kind. She wanted to know if he was well, to apologize for old wounds and misunderstandings. Ethan felt the old ache, but it was distant, muted by time and forgiveness. He wished her well, promising he held no anger, only gratitude for the good years. That weekend, Ethan and Lila hiked a mountain trail just west of Boulder, the air crisp with the scent of pine. They reached the summit at sunset, the valley below ablaze with golden light. Lila unpacked a picnic, and they ate in companionable silence, watching the world turn beneath them. "You ever think about the past?" Lila asked softly. Ethan smiled. "Every day. But it doesn't hurt anymore. It just reminds me how far I've come." After dinner, as they descended the mountain in the fading light, Ethan felt something close, a sense of peace that had once seemed impossible. The ghosts that had haunted him for so long were finally at rest. There was only the present and the promise of tomorrow. Autumn crept into the city. Leaves turned red and gold, the air sharpened, and Ethan realized he'd come full circle, not to the life he'd left behind, but to a better version of himself. In a letter to Frank, he wrote, "It took losing everything to find out what I was truly made of. I hope, wherever you are, you feel that same strength." As Ethan stood on his apartment balcony, the first chill of fall in the air, he closed his eyes and breathed deeply. Life wasn't perfect, but it was his, and that was enough. Winter came early to Colorado that year, painting the city white and silent. Ethan settled into the quiet, grateful for the way snow muffled old echoes and gave every morning a sense of beginning. The air was sharp, the nights long, but for the first time, solitude did not mean loneliness. His life was a patchwork of small joys: books stacked on the kitchen table, soup simmering on the stove, laughter spilling from weekend gatherings at Frank and Julia's house. On Sunday mornings, he and Lila walked hand in hand through the frosted city park, cheeks pink, breath mingling in the cold. They talked about everything: plans for the bookshop, dreams of travel, the ways the past had made them who they were. One evening, after a heavy snowfall, Ethan and Lila bundled up and drove out past the city lights. They found a quiet field where the world seemed untouched. Lila lay in the snow, making an angel, while Ethan built a fire and brewed coffee in a battered tin pot. The flames flickered warm and orange, their laughter rising into the star-cold air. "Do you ever wish you could go back?" Lila asked, her gaze tracing the frozen sky. Ethan shook his head. "I wouldn't change a thing. Every mistake, every heartbreak, it brought me here." They sat close by the fire, sharing secrets and stories, finding comfort in the shared silence. As the moon rose, Ethan felt the last of his old wounds heal, the pain replaced by gratitude for second chances, for love rediscovered, for the quiet certainty that he was right where he belonged. When they drove home that night, the city sparkled with fresh snow, and Ethan felt the future opening wide before him. Winter's promise was not of endings, but of rest, renewal, and the courage to hope. He took Lila's hand and squeezed it, ready for whatever waited beyond the frost and dawn.